Right, just thought I'd do a little update. Just, I guess, share a few bits and bobs, and then do a more in-depth discussion on the Yoni's result that we had back in the goats. I've got Buttons, who's just chilling behind me. So lots and lots of stuff going on at the moment at home and in work. It's really full on at work at the moment, so I'm doing 7 nights a week on call again, which is super busy, and yeah, everything's going really well. So happy there. And then here at home, we've been rushed off our feet with the goats, haven't we, Buttons? And we have had lots of other exciting stuff going on. So of course we've got the baby guinea pigs, which are doing really well. So we're going to be keeping 3 of them. And then we've got 2 that are going to go to new homes soon, which is good. And then we've hopefully got some new arrivals coming in the next couple of weeks in the aviary that I was originally making for Aussie, the galah. So I'm trying to find time to fit that in, but the curveball really recently, and the main purpose behind this video, is just to have a chat through the situation with the disease testing in the goats. So we test twice yearly for a few different diseases. So we test for CAE, or caprine arthritis encephalitis, which is a infectious disease that is found in goats and has a very close connection with the MV virus in sheep as well. So I won't go into too much detail on that one because our goats are all negative, and have been negative since we got them in 2021. I suppose it's important to note at this stage, actually, before I get carried away, that the reason I test twice yearly for most of these things is for 2 main reasons. One is because we stud out the boys, so Apollo goes out and stud. Gizmo's plans are yet to be decided for this autumn, but he may well be out at stud as well. So what that means is that I want to make sure that our goats are disease-free before they see other people's females, but also then disease-free at the end of the season as well. There are some loopholes in this. I make sure that all the goats that are coming into contact with our boys have been tested themselves to make sure that we're minimising the chances of bringing anything in. But alongside that, the real loophole is that the serology response, so the antibody response within the body to a disease, which is where there's a disease threat and then the body mounts a response to deal with that, can take up to 6 months with something like CAE for sure. It's not really practical for us to keep everybody separate for 6 months. So that's why we insist that visiting goats and goats that our boys go out to are tested. And then we make sure that we test afterwards, normally 6 weeks after they've seen the last goat, to make sure that everything is sorted and clear. So to go back to it, so CAE negative, which is good. We also test for CLA, which is caseous lymphadenitis. So this causes abscesses in the lymph nodes or the glands. You've got go Buttons. So negative for that as well. Now that one is probably less common in goats and often would be associated with symptoms or clinical signs. So important to test for because we don't want to spread it, but perhaps of less importance compared to the others, in my opinion. So the serious one is for us at the moment then is the Yoni's disease. So Yoni's is a organism, so it's a mycobacterium which is often found in ruminants and camelids as well. It can live in the environment, so it's something which causes gut disease. It causes a chronic wasting syndrome. The bug itself is very resistant, essentially. So if it's in pasture, then I'm waiting to be sent some studies on this actually, but I don't want to give misinformation. My understanding is that it can last for a couple of years or so on pasture. So it causes chronic wasting. We test for it twice yearly, so I know that all of our goats were negative for it August last year when we did the last round of testing. which is good. And they've been negative for it ever since we got the goats in 2021. And we test everybody, adults and kids, every year, which is slight overkill, to be fair. We test for it in two ways. So we test the serology, which is the antibody response. So what the serology reflects is the body's immune response to the disease. Now you can also then test for a PCR, which is a test on the poo, which actually detects, rather than the body's immune response, whether the bug is actually there. And this was the test that Buttons came back positive for. So the difficult thing is then assessing the importance of that. And what I mean by that is that it's possible that Buttons may have just picked some of it up from the environment, and it's possible that she could clear it from her system. However, we know that Johne's is an infectious disease, so what that means is that other goats or cattle or sheep or camelids in contact can get it. So our goats don't share the pasture. The Shetland ponies share the track with them. We don't have any other stock that they mix with. So it's infectious, and it's infectious via the fecal oral route. So if you have a goat that has it, they're then passing it out in their droppings, and then that's contaminating the pasture, which then means that another goat that comes along and comes into contact with that bit of pasture is then exposed to the disease. Now, so Buttons could potentially get rid of it. The trouble is that once you have a positive test, there's no real guarantee, even if you have a negative one afterwards, that that she's truly negative. Now, what this means for us and for Buttons is it affects a few things. So one of which is that we breed the English goats to sell breeding stock, and we stud the boys out as well. And different to all the other animals that we've got, although the English goats are rare breed and they are still primarily pets, one of the conditions we set ourselves when we got them is that they need to contribute towards their own upkeep, which has gone slightly by the wayside, but we'll gloss over that. So we need to have a situation where we can stud them out. We need to be able to breed them as well. And I feel really strongly as a rare breed that, and I was a good example of the breed, that we should be doing that. So in order to be able to sell breeding stock, we need to make sure that ours are clear of the disease. If they're not clear of the disease, then it's not really fair to go selling potentially infected breeding stock. So that's one point. So we need to go clear because of that. The other is slightly more tricky, and that's that there is, or historically has been, a link between Johne's disease and Crohn's syndrome in people. And Crohn's is essentially a severe inflammatory bowel syndrome. And although it's not, to my understanding, proven that there is a causative factor in that the same bug that causes Johne's, I don't believe is been proven to cause Crohn's syndrome. There seems to be some element of correlation. And because we do the school visits, we'll do care home visits occasionally, and we've got our own children as well, I just can't risk any potential connection with a disease that could then go on and have complications for other people, let alone other animals. So what this means is there's a potential zoonotic effect, and I think I'm being oversensitive to this. I wouldn't want to scaremonger, and I don't think it is a big deal, but I just want to be cautious with it. The other is then the individual goats themselves. So there's been a lot of discussion, and one element of that discussion is, do we just stop breeding the goats and actually they just stay here, including Buttons, and we just accept that at some point it's very possible that we'll have a situation where that sort of chronic wasting starts to happen. And when that does happen, then we make a decision for euthanasia. But again, it's difficult because of the rare breed side of things, and quite frankly, we enjoy breeding them. We also milk them and make our own ice cream, yogurt, cheese, soap as well. And this will be an uncomfortable truth for some people. We sometimes eat them as well. So the weathered kids, so castrated males, we eat meat as part of a balanced diet, and sometimes that includes the weathered male goats as well. So it's unlikely that some of our goats, the likes of Esther and Apollo, would have us eating them, but at the same time, for offspring, that's also part of the reason why we keep them, and is a really important part of breeding livestock as well. What we don't want to do is keep breeding and breeding and breeding and having a situation where actually we're then contributing towards saturating a market where there's already rescue goats out there, and people are always looking for homes for weather goats, that sort of thing. And I wouldn't want any offspring from ours to be contributing towards that sort of problem. So we do eat the weather kids if they're not up to breeding standard. So to get back to the original point then, so yes, so we toyed with the idea of then not breeding, but decided that we are going to continue at the moment and manage the disease situation, and we're in a position to be able to manage the disease situation. So what managing the situation means is we have thoroughly jet washed everything. So I might do a little bit of a walk around the shed at this stage. Probably getting a bit boring just looking at my face anyway. Good girl buttons. So what we've done is pressure washed everything off. So the Shetland ponies had a partial job done because there's not any goats in there at the moment. So when we start letting the goats back out onto the track, then we'll do more of a job of washing that. But certainly the rest of the shed has all been really thoroughly cleaned. So if we come and see little Gizmo. Hey Giz. Gizmo's very cheeky, so I probably won't hang around here long because I will get eaten. Won't I, Gizmo? Hey? You a naughty boy, aren't you? You a naughty boy? Yeah, I know. Yeah, I don't need any kisses either. So this is Gizmo's pen. So also worth noting that we've separated out all of the individual goats as well. So Gizmo's in here, aren't you, Giz? And then we've got where the two girls are. Hey, Carol. You a good girlie? Good girl. So Carol's in here, and then we've got Esther as well, haven't we, Esther? So I would like to give the girls more space, but to be fair, we were just building up to getting them sort of set up ready for kidding anyway. So you're all due in about a month, aren't you? Hey, well, less than a month now, actually. So Buttons is due to kid first, then Esther, and then Carol last. So they're all separated out. We clean everyone out every week anyway, so we don't do deep littering. And then the plan from there is sorting out the outside area. So this is where it gets tricky because it can last in the pasture. So we suspect that the Johne's disease, which is the mycobacterium itself that causes it, most likely came from a new bit of pasture which we took on from Dad, because we rent our micro holding from Mum and Dad very kindly. So we took on a new section last year, so it was fenced off last winter, and then we didn't put any goats on it then until Apollo had a brief stint until he decided he wanted to come back in the normal pasture, but essentially September. So we think that's where it came from. So what we're going to do is keep the goats off that for as long as we possibly can, certainly for the rest of this year, and we're going to try and keep them all off the pasture that they've been on for the last couple of years probably for the next 6 months or so. You can't see in the background, but Gizmo's been a pain, aren't you, Giz? So this Carol's a good girl, isn't you? So where was I? So we're going to try and keep them off the pasture. Keeping them off the pasture means that we need to allow them outside access. So they're inside at the moment while I try and get everything sorted. But the outside access means utilising the little concrete pad that we've got. And then also it means creating a safe space for the track. So the track itself, I don't know, 3 years ago now, we surfaced with some cocoa fibre matting with some wool underneath as well. Now, that is sort of starting to degrade, it's starting to get muddy, and because Buttons has been out on it, and therefore there's a potential that she may have been spreading the mycobacterium, we need to make sure that it's safe for the goats to go out onto it. Because we'll be retesting the whole herd. Get in on the action, Gizmo. So we'll be retesting the whole herd before we take them out, and also before we start mixing them together again. So as long as everybody is negative, then we're good to go with that. But then what I'm also working on is surfacing the track. So very lucky, we had part of my initial loan that I put into the Vets with Pets business come back recently, and although I hate spending money, we decided to smash out and buy some mats to start doing the track. So I'll do a bit more of a video on this at some point, but we'll do a sneak preview out of the door. So I don't know how well this shows up because I can't actually see, but what we're doing is working on surfacing the area with these mats, which is then going to have a sand topping, because the holes are a little bit too big for goat feet, so we need to make it safe for them. What are you doing, Esther? So we're going to be topping that with sand, and essentially what that means is, although we've not gotten rid of everything, we'll have covered up the majority of the mud essentially that's out there. The goats don't really go on the mud this time of year, but my concern is that as soon as it starts drying up and becoming dusty, then that dust is going to contain the mycobacterium and therefore be a risk of infection for the goats. So if we surface it all, they've got a really decent size area that they can go out onto, which is as safe as we can possibly make it. There's no point trying to decontaminate the pasture or the track. To my knowledge, I don't think there's anything that would do that. Certainly nothing that I would consider safe for the environment, or that we'd want to put out on something which the animals are going to be grazing on. So that's part of the control measures. So cleaning and more cleaning and disinfecting, not sharing buckets. We used to put all the bedding from the goats into the ponies, because the ponies then would just lie on it, no worries when the goats are getting a bit fussy. So we stopped doing that as well. So just being really cautious with cleanliness, and then overly cautious with the outside access, I will admit. But then we've still got to consider the goat-to-goat infection. So I'm going to be retesting everyone and making sure that everyone is negative, and before mixing everybody together. Then what we'll be doing is, when we're at a point where everyone can mix together, then they can start going out again. Hey, Polly. So that would be a really nice thing to see. But unfortunately, it'd be a different story for Buttons. So we were considering selling Buttons later this year anyway, because she's a lovely goat, but she's just slightly more standoffish than the others. So she loves me, but strangers, she's good as gold, but she's just not overly friendly with people. Whereas we sort of want goats that are really happy being all over people and having people all over them for visits and for showing and stuff. Showing is one thing I haven't touched on actually. So side note at the moment is we'll be testing and retesting everyone, making sure everyone is negative before going out to any shows. But to go back to Buttons, so she is a potential risk to her unborn kids. So she's due to give birth in just under a month. So if we were to leave the kids with her, then it's very probable that through being in contact with her poo, or even just suckling on an udder that's unclean, as well as being transferable through the milk, they're going to be at risk of then picking up the mycobacterium. We're not fussing you. Come here. Going to be at risk of picking up the mycobacterium from Buttons. So the really rubbish thing in this whole situation is that we need to watch her like a hawk, and when she gives birth, we will be literally taking the kids out of her and away from her straight away, so she doesn't have any contact with them and they don't have any contact with her, and certainly not drinking any of her milk. And then Buttons will be cold because she's going to be an infection risk to the others, and also is probable it's that she's going to ultimately develop this chronic wasting. So that's just gutting. Yeah, really gutting, and the whole situation is just really rubbish. But working off the principle that there's no point testing for these diseases if we're not going to take any action on it. So yeah, we could just not test for it, because if you don't test for anything, then you never find anything, and ignorance is bliss. But then what happens if we were to find ourselves in a situation where we have a disease outbreak and actually it turns out the whole herd's got it, or we've sold animals or given animals away that have it? It's just not really a situation that we can end up in ethically. But the whole situation just been absolutely heartbreaking, to be honest. Really, really gutting. And I think particularly for me, in that big part of my reason for keeping the animals is because it gives me something to get away from a really intense working lifestyle. And I'm really happy with having a really intense working lifestyle, and I'm very happy with everything that we do. But the way I describe it to a lot of people is that I have such an all-consuming work and profession, because it can be really tough in multiple ways. Managing a team is really hard, dealing with complaints is really hard, dealing with when things go wrong, complicated cases, death, all those sort of things. As a vet, that's a challenge. So having the animals gives me a release from that, because it gives me something that's equally all-consuming to focus on and to enjoy and to plough loads of time into, and that's always been a big part of me. And I'm very lucky to have a supportive family, so shout out to Emily as always, and the children, because I couldn't do it without them as well. But then when there's a situation, Apollo's just kicking off in there because I've walked away from him and I'm with Buttons. What are you doing? Hey, what are you doing? So when we have a situation where it becomes a bit too interlinked, in that my main reason for being a vet is so that I can look after my own animals better. That's always been probably the biggest driving factor. But then when actually even that is not enough for things like this, I keep everything really clean, we disease test, we do everything we possibly can do, and you end up in a situation where we'll have to take Button's kids away at birth and rear them. All the goats currently inside, they're currently all separated. That's not how I want them to be. And these things are all temporary, and hopefully we'll move on from this. But it's just really, really challenging having a situation where we're then faced with culling one of our pets because in the grand scheme of things, in my opinion, it's the ethical right thing to do all round. But that's where we are, and I think I'm very privileged that we're in a position where I know that we had a negative test 6 months ago. We've got the means to keep testing. We've got the means to test more frequently than maybe what I would be recommending if it was a client's animals. Not that I do any farm work, but and I think the biggest thing for me that is going to be a real issue is time. Anyone who knows me knows that I like to be as efficient as possible in all aspects of life, and with the animals, the way that we keep them is down to fine art in terms of keeping the welfare absolute maximum, but also in a way that's manageable for myself and Emily to be able to do it, and provide all of their welfare needs, but actually also keep it enjoyable and keep it an achievable amount of work. And it's things like this that just start to push things into being an unachievable amount of work, because we're faced with the routine cleaning down. We're faced with keeping all the goats separately and all the actual work that entitles, cleaning utensils, cleaning the buckets, and all these things are things that get done anyway, but we just need to do them much more frequently than before. And then the chronic stress and worry, because it's fair to say that even with poor Buttons here, and even when Buttons isn't here and we've reared her kids and decided what we're going to do with them, because that'll be another decision to make, we've got the chronic worry that are any of the others going to come back with a positive test? And what do we do in that situation? Because Buttons is lovely, aren't you, Buttons? She's such a placid, docile goat. But close your ears when I say this, it's probably Esther that's the favourite of the girls, and Carol is a mini Esther in the way that she's developing in terms of her temperament. I think I'd be even more gutted if one of those comes down with it, and Apollo, to be fair. But here we are. We know about it. We've set it really early, and we've got some horrendously horrible stuff to do coming up to sort out making sure we stay disease free. But yes, that's a little update. And I was aiming for half an hour or so. It's looking like we're about 27 minutes, so I think that'll do us. I'm going to carry on laying some more of the track, and we'll probably aim for hopefully a more positive update when we've got some kids on the ground in a month or so, and we'll update on the track situation before then. We've got some super exciting podcasts coming up as well. Really looking forward to a trip out tomorrow to Wildside Exotics. Hopefully we'll get to see some mountain lions and have a good chat with the team there, so that'll be exciting. And yes, we'll update you on how kidding goes, and yeah, where we're at with the rest of the goats in due course. So hopefully that's not too depressing a video, but I just thought it important to share a lot of that information, particularly, I guess, just as a resource for people that maybe have had goats from us or will do in the future as well. It's a bit niche maybe for a lot of followers, but hopefully has been interesting nonetheless, and just highlights how challenging it can be trying to do the right thing. So on that note, please reach out, drop me a comment if you've got any questions, give us a follow and all those sort of things as well. And yeah, look forward to updating everyone, hopefully more positive stuff soon. Bye-bye.